Hello everyone and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before we get to that, here's a look at the latest headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in New Delhi as the two nations look to bolster their long-fraught relations in the face of Donald Trump's tariff threats. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un calls for a rapid expansion of the country's nuclear weapons capabilities, citing ongoing U.S.-South Korea military exercises as he warns it could ignite a war. Myanmar and Thailand's busiest trade crossing remains closed for a second day after the military junta pledges to throttle black markets funding armed opposition groups ahead of December's disputed elections. Air Canada's unionized flight attendants reach an agreement with the country's largest carrier, ending the first strike by its cabin crew in 40 years that upended travel for hundreds of thousands of passengers. And with great fanfare, a historic red wooden church, regarded as one of Sweden's most beautiful buildings, begins its slow move from the Arctic town of Kiruna to make way for the expansion of Europe's largest underground mine. We begin right here in Washington, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the White House on Monday, showcasing a noticeably different diplomatic approach as compared to his February visit. He arrived at the White House in a sharp black jacket, shirt, and slacks, a departure from his usual military-style attire. Zelensky also struck a more conciliatory tone, a stark change from the February discussion, which quickly turned tense, with President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance openly criticizing Zelensky in front of cameras. Now, this time, the Ukrainian leader presented a more cooperative demeanor, and the shift reflected lessons learned from earlier encounters and coaching from European leaders on engaging President Trump effectively. The Ukrainian leader's attire was praised by the same reporter who mocked him in that October meeting for not wearing formal attire. Even President Trump acknowledged his new look, remarking on the difference from the previous encounter.
First of all, Mr. President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better.
Now, ahead of Monday's White House visit, U.S. and Ukrainian officials reportedly discussed Zelensky's attire, advising him to avoid his typical military-style look. European leaders also coached him on how to engage effectively with the president. And on Monday, Zelensky repeatedly thanked President Trump, handed over a personal letter from his wife, and expressed appreciation for gestures like a map of Ukraine. Now, many say the approach was aimed at smoothing relations. And since the February blow-up, Zelensky has adjusted his international appearances, wearing more formal attire at the Vatican for Pope Francis' funeral and at a NATO summit in the Netherlands. After the session, the U.S. president contacted his Russian counterpart and updated him directly. He even announced that he was arranging a face-to-face meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin.
There's been a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin on the initiative of the U.S. president. In the phone call, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump supported the idea of continuing direct talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations.
Now, according to the Kremlin, the call lasted for 40 minutes, and the high-stakes meeting on Monday came just after President Trump hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin last week in Alaska to discuss the Ukrainian war. But that effort didn't result in any deal being announced, and while the February meeting had made global headlines for being a shouting match, Monday's engagement was completely void of the combativeness. The U.S. president described his meeting good, saying they discussed security guarantees to be provided to Ukraine by Europe in coordination with Washington. Meanwhile, President Zelensky called the guarantees a starting point towards ending the war and stressed that a meeting with Putin would be necessary to resolve sensitive issues. And as cameras flashed and world leaders jostled for the spotlight in Washington, one face was notably quieter and for a while, completely missing. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance barely made a peep during President Trump's high-stakes summit with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, offering little more than a polite handshake and a few words. But while the world dissected every sentence out of Trump, Zelensky, and their European counterparts, Vance was busy perfecting his swing on the golf courses and soaking in the countryside. His silence has now become the talk of social media, where people are actually celebrating that for once, Vice President kept his finger-pointing speeches to himself. Here's more on Vance's about-face.
While the world's cameras were glued to Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky, and their high-drama diplomacy crew in Washington, one man was conspicuously silent. US Vice President J.D. Vance. At the big summit on August 18, Vance's only visible contribution was a handshake with Zelensky and a polite exchange that could have been mistaken for two neighbors bumping into each other at the grocery store.
Good to see you. Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
If you blinked, you missed it. But guess what? Social media was delighted. The internet collectively applauded Vance's greatest diplomatic achievement yet, keeping his mouth shut. So, where was J.D. Vance really? While his boss was busy brokering a potential ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, Vance was several thousand miles away enjoying a private holiday in the UK. For 4 days, the VP ditched the West Wing for the west coast of Scotland, staying at a luxurious country estate in Hurlford, near Kilmarnock. His schedule? Golfing at Donald Trump's Turnberry Resort, family time in the Scottish countryside, and a side trip to England's Cotswolds, where, in a surprising twist, he did squeeze in a meeting with Britain's new Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. Think of it as vacation diplomacy. Swing a few clubs, sip some tea, and casually talk foreign affairs over scones. He returned to the US just in time for the big meet at the White House, where Zelensky, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and other leaders gathered with Trump. Vance's absence physically and digitally was also notable in Alaska, where Trump and Vladimir Putin met for high-stakes talks that, spoiler alert, went nowhere. This contrast couldn't be sharper. Back in this year, when Zelensky last visited Washington, Vance wasn't just present. He was the loudest man in the room. In fact, he publicly scolded Zelensky for not saying thank you enough for U.S. aid.
They should have.
Have you said thank you once? This
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today,
have you said thank
even-
you?
The White House later even posted a photo of Vance jabbing his finger towards the Ukrainian leader, captioned with his now infamous line, "Have you said thank you once?" Fast forward to now, and Vance has traded his finger wagging for fairways, leaving everyone to wonder, is this a new, quieter statesman, or just a man who discovered Scottish golf courses are more fun than Ukrainian ceasefire negotiations?
Even though she's a very young person, she's served.
And now staying in Washington, President Donald Trump has vowed to change how elections are conducted in the United States. The president pledged to issue an executive order to end the use of mail-in ballots as well as voting machines ahead of next year's midterm elections, a move that could likely favor his political party. Now, speaking to reporters at the White House after posting about it on his social media platform, the president said he was looking to end mail-in ballots due to their alleged corrupt nature.
And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them.
Now, Trump has long opposed mail-in ballots and said his order would bring honesty to the midterms. And sitting alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he insisted there could never be an honest election if mail-in ballots remained in use.
We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected.
Now, the president's comments came after he claimed in an interview that Russian President Vladimir Putin, during their meeting in Alaska on Friday, echoed his grievances about mail-in voting and the 2020 presidential election.
You know, Vladimir Putin said one of the most interesting things. He said, your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting. He said, no country has mail-in voting. It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections.
Now, to be clear, mail-in and absentee ballots can be counted after Election Day in 18 states, provided they're postmarked on or before that date. And just over 30% of ballots cast in last year's election were reportedly submitted by mail. And according to the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, 34 countries allow mail-in voting. Of them, 12 countries, including Germany, Britain, Denmark, New Zealand, and Canada, offer mail-in voting to all voters. 22 countries, including India, Australia, Spain, France, Greece, limit it to some voters only. In fact, research shows there's no evidence that mail-in balloting is less secure than other methods. Pro-democracy groups have reportedly warned that eliminating it could disenfranchise millions of Americans. Yet the president continues to brand it fraudulent despite it being the same system that helped him win last year's election and secure Republican control of Congress. He's also pushed for years to end electronic voting machines, calling instead for paper ballots and hand counts, a system officials say is both time-consuming and costly. Now, additionally, this push comes as he urges states to redraw congressional districts to help Republicans maintain their majority in the House of Representatives. But ironically, despite his criticism, the president has cast mail-in ballots twice in Florida in the 2020 primary elections and used absentee ballots in New York in both 2018 and 2017. He even urged his supporters to vote by mail during last year's campaign. Take a look.
We've set an all-time record in the early voting, by the way, so if you have a mail-in ballot, get that damn ballot in, please, immediately, because they've already started cheating in Lancaster. They've cheated.
Now, Democrats led by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer say the president's move amount to a return to Jim Crow era, a period when many states enforced racial segregation and disenfranchised African-American voters.
And vote by mail is safe, secure, and reliable. This is yet another one of Trump's attempts to silence Americans. Senate Democrats will make sure that any and every measure that would make it even more difficult for Americans to vote will be dead on arrival in the Senate.
So as the midterms draw closer, Donald Trump's call to end mail-in ballots and voting machines guarantees that the rules of America's democracy will be just as much a battlefield as the ballots themselves. And now to Florida, where a deadly crash has sparked a political firestorm in the country. Last week, at least 3 people were killed after a semi-truck driver, allegedly an illegal immigrant, made a rogue U-turn on a highway in Florida's St. Lucie County. The maneuver caused the trailer to jackknife and collide with a minivan. And the Florida Highway Patrol reported that the truck towing a box trailer was in the outer lane when it attempted a U-turn into a section of the turnpike reserved for official use. Images from the incident showed rescue crews using jacks to lift the trailer from the van and extricate the remains of the passengers. The driver, later identified as Harjinder Singh, was arrested by U.S. Marshals in California on a warrant for 3 counts of vehicular homicide and immigration violations.
3 people lost their lives as a result of his recklessness. Harjinder Singh is in custody on state vehicular homicide charges and immigration violations. He will no longer be able to damage and destroy the lives of Floridians and visitors. At the conclusion of his state charges, he will be deported.
Now, reports suggest Singh had allegedly entered California illegally in September of 2018 and was taken into custody by Border Patrol. He was initially processed for expedited deportation but was not sent back. The Department of Homeland Security reportedly said that after receiving his work permit in June of 2021, Singh was able to secure a commercial driver's license in California. Now, these revelations set off a political firestorm between the Trump administration and California Governor Gavin Newsom's office, which has also been involved in a heated debate with the administration over congressional redistricting. In a statement on Monday, the White House criticized California and Newsom, calling Harjinder Singh an Indian national who was granted a commercial driver's license by a so-called sanctuary state.
The illegal alien was granted a commercial driver's license by the so-called sanctuary state of California, whose reckless policies put the lives of American citizens at risk every single day. But instead of acknowledging the tragedy, criminal illegal alien sympathizer Gavin Newsom callously doubled down, claiming that giving driver's licenses to illegals improves public safety.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem also weighed in, saying the tragedy should have never have happened. Meanwhile, Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin called the situation asinine and asked how many more innocent people have to die before Governor Newsom stops playing games with the safety of the American public. Hitting back, Newsom's office said the Trump administration was either lying or clueless, adding that Singh had entered the United States during President Trump's first term. The governor's office went a step further and even asked Grok AI chatbots on X on who the president was in 2018. McLaughlin, however, fired back, stating that Singh's work authorization had been rejected under the Trump administration in September of 2020, but was approved under the Biden administration in June of 2021. With claims and counterclaims flying from both sides, the case has quickly turned into a national battle over immigration, public safety, and accountability. And today we end with two U.S. cabinet secretaries. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on one side and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on the other. Washington saw them pull off a different kind of showdown, not at the White House or at any heated press conference, but in the Pentagon gym. For a few minutes, policy was put on hold and physical prowess took center stage as both battled for the title of fittest in the Trump cabinet, attempting 50 pull-ups and 100 push-ups. And the cause? To make America fit and not fat. Take a look.
America is used to seeing its leaders face off in debates, or at worst, they stumble through speeches, mix up facts, beg for a Nobel Prize that nobody offered, or dodge Epstein questions. But very rarely do they compete on a pull-up bar. It was an unfamiliar showdown, and it involved two of Donald Trump's core members. A military gym turned into an unlikely arena. On one side was the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. On the other, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary. Both entered the Pentagon gym, decided to trade policies for push-ups and perform a fitness challenge. It's dubbed the Pete and the Bobby Challenge if you must. The rules are simple, but brutal too, considering one macho is in his 70s. 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, under 10 minutes. A lot of sweat and no excuses. And of course, this has the president's blessing. The White House says this is an official start of an initiative.
Make America healthy.
Instead of a 500-page healthy policy, they delivered 150 reps. Consider this a play and look at Act 1, Scene 1. RFK jumps straight onto the bar. Jeans, t-shirts, he's surrounded by military troops. Next, Hegseth joins in and turns it into a full-blown competition. Cut to another shot. Navies and troops surrounding the two, cheering them. One Marine didn't just beat the clock, he smashed it, completing the whole challenge in under 3 minutes. The battle went on.
Gunnery starting high. 243. 243.
Hegseth ended up emerging victorious. He clocked just over the 5-minute mark. RFK Jr. finished seconds later. And then came the climax of this modern comedy. The real message drops.
And we're going to be fit, not fat.
Hegseth said, this is just the beginning. America needs to eat better. More than two-thirds of reserve troops are overweight. That's unacceptable, says America's Secretary of Defense. He also invited his cabinet colleague, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
We want to send out a challenge to Sean Duffy.
And just like that, this full-scale fitness tour kicked off. No bills were passed, no papers were released, but for a few minutes straight, Washington watched two cabinet secretaries fight gravity, out-rep each other. The Pentagon stopped being the Pentagon and became a UFC octagon cage.
That's our show for today. From all of us here at First Post America, we certainly thank you all for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.